In an appalling act of violence that was captured on camera in July of 2024, a Philadelphia woman shot someone's young child in the city's Holmesburg neighborhood during an argument over a trivial drug dispute. The disturbing footage showed the perpetrator opening fire on the child and his parents outside their home while yelling profanities at the victims. By the time police arrived at the scene, the victims were nowhere to be found. As it turned out, the child's parents were worried about crossing paths with the police due to some outstanding warrants for their arrest. The couple turned up at a local emergency room with the baby, who had a gunshot wound to the leg. While speaking to detectives, the victims revealed that the shooting stemmed from a $100 drug dispute between them and the accused shooter, 28-year-old Dominique Billups. According to police, the child's father was the intended target of the gunshots, while the mother and child just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Thankfully, the child survived and was released from the hospital after receiving treatment for his wound. Billups was booked into custody on suspicion of aggravated assault and gun-related charges. The case is ongoing. Number 15. Jesse Montes Thornton II. 63-year-old Mark Cohen and his wife reserved VIP movie theater seats ahead of time for a Monday night date in July of 2023. But when they arrived at the cinema in Pompano Beach, Florida, a man and woman were sitting in their seats. When Cohen politely asked the pair to move, the man viciously assaulted him. Footage showed the attacker, later identified as 27-year-old Jesse Montes Thornton II, repeatedly punching Cohen in the face, causing him to fall down the aisle stairs. Bystanders pulled Thornton off of the victim and he fled the scene with his female companion, while Cohen was taken to the hospital with serious injuries. At the time, investigators were unable to identify the suspect. The Broward County Sheriff's Office released footage of the attacker to the public, along with an appeal for information that could help lead to his arrest. Thornton was finally arrested on a charge of aggravated battery with great bodily harm in September of 2023, following a 2-month-long investigation. He pleaded not guilty and bonded out of custody, but landed back behind bars in early 2024 following his arrest for a domestic violence incident. According to a police report, Thornton struck his girlfriend during an argument, as well as a neighbor who tried to break the fight up. He's accused of punching, kicking and spitting on the officers who responded to the scene as they wrestled him into custody. The arrest report also states that Thornton elbowed one officer in the face and shoved another cop's head against a paved walkway. He continued to resist even after the officers managed to handcuff him following a prolonged struggle. Thornton kicked and headbutted inside the police cruiser, smashing out a window and causing significant damage to the doors and interior. Authorities charged him with 2 counts of resisting arrest with violence, 2 counts of battery on a law enforcement officer, 2 counts of battery, 2 counts of resisting without violence, and 1 count of criminal mischief, resulting in damages of $1,000 or more. He pleaded not guilty to the new charges and remains held without bond amid his ongoing cases. Number 14. Andrew Cobb. 56-year-old Maria Galleguillo was riding her bicycle along a bike-only path in Key Biscayne, Florida, one morning in July of 2024 when she encountered 54-year-old Andrew Cobb, who was jogging in her lane. As she tried to pass Cobb, he struck her in the face with his water bottle, causing her to fall off her bike. The wealthy businessman initially stopped at the scene, but instead of apologizing to Galleguillo, he reportedly said, "You have to share the road. I've been hit by you guys before." He ran away before police arrived, as a crowd of witnesses came to Galleguillo's aid. The injured cyclist snapped a photo of Cobb as he left the scene and posted it on social media in hopes that he would be identified and held accountable for his actions. Galleguillo also shared images of the bruises, cuts, road rash, and other injuries she was hospitalized with and underwent surgery for after the incident. She described Cobb's actions as deliberate and malicious, noting that he had plenty of room to avoid colliding with her, especially since he wasn't supposed to be in the bike lane to begin with. Cobb was charged with felony aggravated battery with great bodily harm. He remains free on bond while awaiting his next court date, which is scheduled for August of 2024. Number 13. Robert Norker. While responding to a residential break-in early one morning in June of 2024, police in Avon, Indiana, were met by a woman who said that her Chick-fil-A co-worker had broken into her house. 38-year-old Robert Norker's car was idling in the driveway, and he was still inside the residence when officers arrived at the scene. He exited the house covered in his own blood and told police that he had to smash a window in order to get inside so he could perform an exorcism on the woman who he believed was possessed. Norker made a number of bizarre statements while being taken into custody, including that his co-worker hadn't been stabbed. He told officers not to look him in the eyes and asked him to go inside the house, find his CD and play track number 3 to save her. The victim and Norker had known each other for over 20 years. Prior to the break-in, Norker had sent the woman strange text messages about not listening to Spotify. Inside the home, officers found a trail of blood leading from the broken back door window to the kitchen, along with a bloody CD on the counter. The woman's entertainment and stereo system were destroyed, and it appeared as though Norker had tried to write in blood on her projector screen. Norker was taken to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation before being booked into the Hendricks County Jail on suspicion of felony residential entry, criminal mischief, and disorderly conduct. He was released the same day on a $500 bond and is currently awaiting his next court date. Number 12. Yonni Baros. 2 people were killed and 6 others were wounded in October of 2022 when a knife-wielding madman went on a stabbing spree along the Las Vegas Strip. The carnage began shortly after 32-year-old Guatemalan national Yonni Baros approached a group of showgirls and asked to take a picture with them. He pulled out a large knife as if to show it off, then without warning he fatally stabbed 30-year-old Maris DiGiovanni in the heart. Baros then plunged the blade into 19-year-old Victoria Cayetano's shoulder. He chased after the other dancers as they ran away and stabbed 26-year-old Anna Westby. Baros also stabbed a 47-year-old bystander named Brett Hallett, who died from his injuries. Hallett's wife Carmelita told the Las Vegas Review-Journal that she was walking with her husband when he suddenly flinched. A few moments later he said, "I don't think I'm going to make it," and collapsed. According to a surviving victim, Baros said, "Sorry man," before plunging the knife into Hallett's back. Following his arrest, Baros told officers that he thought the showgirls were laughing at him and making fun of his outfit. The attack was completely unprovoked, according to the women, who denied mocking Baros. Court documents revealed a bizarre series of events leading up to the stabbing spree. A friend invited Baros to stay with them, then rescinded the invite, and the accused killer became noticeably paranoid about people picking on him. Baros was in the United States illegally at the time of the stabbings. A former friend of the accused killer told the New York Post that he had previously worked as an exotic dancer in Los Angeles, but that he never held a regular job and mooched off his romantic partners. Just months earlier, Baros had flaunted a luxurious lifestyle on social media, but he became down on his luck and ended up homeless. On the day of the attacks, Baros entered a nearby hotel and tried getting a job, but he was turned down, so he tried selling some of his belongings, telling a security guard that he was trying to come up with enough money to return to Guatemala. According to a police report, the guard reportedly told Baros to jump in front of a train, which the hotel denied, and Baros proceeded to attack his victims. He was charged with 2 counts of open murder and 6 counts of attempted murder, but was found mentally unfit to stand trial. The judge ordered him to undergo treatment at a state psychiatric hospital in an attempt to determine whether he can be restored to competency. Number 11. Robert Owen Greenhalgh. 36-year-old father of 2, Robert Smethurst was celebrating his birthday at a bar in the English town of Bolton in September of 2021 when he accidentally stepped on 31-year-old bodybuilder Robert Owen Greenhalgh's foot. He apologized and everything seemed fine until nearly 2 hours later when Greenhalgh attacked Smethurst and his cousin, Aaron Bates, in an intoxicated and drug-fueled rampage. Bates suffered a concussion, but Smethurst was struck with so much force that he suffered immediate brain trauma. Smethurst died from his injuries and Greenhalgh fled the scene in his work van. The accused killer was arrested later that day on suspicion of murder. During a search of Greenhalgh's phone, detectives discovered text messages bragging about spending more than $64,000 on cocaine over a 6-month period. He also boasted about using steroids and hurting people while working as a debt collector, pointing toward a troubling propensity for violence. The phone also contained messages from Greenhalgh's mum admonishing her son for his abhorrent lifestyle, which in her words included lying, stealing, and controlling with brute force. She issued a series of warnings including, "You are kidding yourself if you think this is going to end well," and "Only idiots do what you are doing, not nice people." But Greenhalgh ignored his mother's tough love and continued spiraling out of control. On the night of the deadly attack, he was reportedly high on cocaine and consumed 15 shots of liquor. After fleeing the scene, he drove to a friend's house and busted the front door in for a laugh when it wouldn't open. Greenhalgh admitted to a reduced manslaughter charge in 2022 and was sentenced to 15 years, including 11 years and 3 months in prison, followed by 3 years and 9 months on supervised release. Number 10. Devante Palmer. A shopping trip to a Walmart store in Shreveport, Louisiana, took a terrifying turn for Lonnie Blansett in June of 2024 when a complete stranger attacked him out of nowhere. Blansett grabbed his gun in preparation to defend himself, but his attacker, 31-year-old Devante Palmer, tried grabbing it out of his hand. As the men wrestled over the weapon, it accidentally discharged. Thankfully, no one was struck by the bullet, but Palmer refused to get off of Blansett, who later accused onlookers of standing around and filming the attack while he screamed for help. At some point during the struggle, Blansett realized that the gun was jammed. He released the magazine and grabbed a knife out of his pocket and slashed Palmer across the arm. Palmer attempted to flee, but he and Blansett were detained for questioning. After speaking with both men and several witnesses, police determined that Blansett was innocent of any wrongdoing and arrested Palmer on a simple assault charge. They were unable to identify a motive for the attack, leading them to conclude that Blansett was targeted at random. The case is ongoing. Number 9. Savelle Hightower. 27-year-old Andrew Redioff was walking to his job at an elementary school in Greenville, North Carolina, one morning in February of 2024 when a stranger on a bicycle opened fire on him without warning. He narrowly survived after being shot 5 times. Later identified as 38-year-old Savelle Hightower, a convicted felon from Ohio, the accused shooter tried to flee the scene but was stopped by a police officer. He was apprehended after a brief shootout with the cop and is now facing a laundry list of criminal charges, including multiple counts of attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon with the intent to kill resulted in serious injury, assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill on a law enforcement officer, being a felon in possession of a firearm and possession of a stolen firearm. When asked why he committed the crime, Hightower reportedly said that he had been poisoned and needed to make a sacrifice in order to survive. He showed signs of extreme paranoia, including a belief that he was being followed by the government and that federal agents had bugged his apartment. Hightower also said that he had called 911 multiple times the previous night and during the week leading up to his arrest. Records show that he remains held at the Pitt County Jail with bond set at over $7 million. Number 8. Deashi Calhoun. 82-year-old Hubert Mullins was working as a doorman on Manhattan's Upper West Side in September of 2022 when a complete stranger slashed him with a machete and doused him with bear spray. He was hospitalized with a skull fracture, and the suspect, 20-year-old Deashi Calhoun, was charged with attempted murder, assault and possession of a weapon. Calhoun, who was described as a woman in initial news reports but goes by he/him pronouns, had at least 7 prior arrests under his belt at the time of the slashing. On at least 2 occasions over a 5-week period leading up to the incident, he was arrested, twice for threatening strangers with a machete. He was charged with misdemeanors in both cases and released without bail. Several of the other crimes Calhoun was accused of involved deadly weapons, yet none of these incidents landed him behind bars. Many people blamed Calhoun's repeated releases without bail on New York State's bail reform policies, which prohibit judges from imposing bail against defendants for the vast majority of crimes. Bail was set at $500,000 following the attack on Mullins, and Calhoun remained at Rikers Island until he pleaded guilty to assault in August of 2023. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, followed by 3 years of probation, and will become eligible for parole in December of 2026. Number 7. Raymond Link. In May of 2024, a 59-year-old woman was attacked in broad daylight while walking her dog in McHenry Park in Illinois. The assailant, who was later identified by police as 47-year-old Raymond Link, was accused of placing his full body weight on the victim, trying to strangle her and stomping on her head and neck. A bystander attempted to intervene and was punched over a dozen times, leaving him with a broken clavicle. By the time police arrived at the scene, the woman was unconscious. She was hospitalized with serious injuries including dog bites, lacerations, a ruptured eye, and an open facial fracture. Link was detained without bail on charges of attempted murder, aggravated battery by strangulation, and 2 counts each of aggravated battery causing great bodily harm and aggravated battery in a public place. He had no known connections to the victim, and authorities have yet to reveal a suspected motive for the attack. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 6. Italian couple targeted in hate crime. In July of 2024, a pair of male lovers were attacked in Rome while walking hand in hand before dawn. They were on their way home after a pride event when a car cut them off as they crossed the street, causing one of the men to scream out of fear. 3 men and a woman exited the vehicle and hurled derogatory and homophobic insults at the victims. They proceeded to beat the couple, who initially tried to defend themselves but were outnumbered. In the meantime, onlookers passed by without stopping to help or stood by and recorded the incident with their phone instead of intervening. One of the men was kicked, punched, and hit with a belt, and both victims were struck in the head. 3 Good Samaritans eventually stepped in to help, and the injured couple went to the emergency room. In an anonymous statement, the pair condemned hate-driven violence and called on others to do the same, noting that it has no place in modern society. They also described feeling mocked and deeply hurt by witnesses who took the time to film them but didn't try to help. Number 5. Ambushed by strangers. 32-year-old Spencer Goggin was waiting for a taxi after a night out, celebrating a friend's birthday in Perth, Australia in June of 2022, when a group of strangers attacked him from behind without warning. He didn't get a chance to see the assailants as they beat him and stomped on his head, but he could hear bystanders yelling at the attackers to stop. Goggin suffered a concussion, multiple cuts, 2 black eyes, and other injuries. After the attack, he told 9 News that he felt lucky to be alive, but on the same note, he pointed out that nobody should ever have to feel lucky that they survived a night out. He credited his survival with his split-second decision to put his hand beneath his face when he was knocked to the ground, which provided some cushioning between his head and the pavement. Instead of taking a taxi home, Goggin took a cab to the hospital, where he received treatment for his injuries. He went public with his story, in hopes that someone would be able to identify his attackers and to speak out against senseless acts of violence. Unfortunately, it appears as though the suspects were never caught. Number 4. Shondell Larkin. In late March of 2024, an innocent man was stabbed to death on a MAX train in Portland, Oregon, during his evening commute home from work. Police found him dead on a train station platform with multiple stab wounds, and it was apparent based on surveillance footage and other evidence that the attack was random. A short while later, officers found a man on the train with blood on his clothing. Identified by law enforcement as 51-year-old Shondell Larkin, he was wanted out of California for lurking outside women's homes while on a GPS ankle monitor. Larkin had also previously served a 17-year prison sentence for assaulting a woman in her home. When questioned about his motive for the stabbing, Larkin reportedly told police that voices in his head had told him to do it. He's currently being held without bail at the Multnomah County Jail on charges of second-degree murder and unlawful use of a weapon. Number 3. Jermaine Bennett and Savon Morrison. 49-year-old Jeffrey Chapman was approached by 2 men and bludgeoned to death with a tire iron during a midnight bike ride in Clearwater, Florida in October of 2022. He had no known connection to the attackers, and a 79-year-old man had nearly been killed in a similar attack about an hour earlier. leading police to believe that he was targeted randomly. The first victim, John Budanas, told police that a car had pulled up beside him. 2 people exited the vehicle, and one of them asked Budanas if he knew the area. The next thing the senior citizen knew, he was being beaten with a tire iron. He managed to call 911 afterward and survived his injuries. Relying on surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts, investigators tracked one of the suspects to an optician's office where he was an employee. 26-year-old Jermaine Bennett admitted to the crimes during questioning without showing any remorse and was charged with first-degree murder. A second suspect, 18-year-old Savon Morrison, was arrested the following week on a principal to first-degree murder charge. Bennett was slated to go to trial in February of 2025, but he decided to plead guilty as charged in May of 2024 and was automatically sentenced to life without parole. Morrison remains held without bail and is scheduled to go to trial in January of 2025. Today's topic was requested by Kelly's Homemade Kitchen and Emilio IMAT 5651. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Alexander Russell. 70-year-old Mary Jane Dustin was enjoying a neighborhood walk in Windsor Locks, Connecticut in October of 2022 when someone snuck up behind her and struck her in the back of the head in broad daylight, knocking her to the ground. She was hospitalized with a major head laceration, a broken finger, and head injuries which affected her memory and her ability to communicate. The neurologist who treated her predicted that she would eventually make a full recovery, but only time would tell. In the meantime, police charged the alleged attacker, 40-year-old Alexander LeSieur Russell, with first-degree assault and first-degree reckless endangerment. Records show that he remains held on $25,000 bail amid the ongoing case. Just a year before the attack on Dustin, Russell had been arrested for shoving a 62-year-old librarian. Records show that he also has an arrest record out of Brevard County, Florida, dating back to 2016 for criminal mischief and resisting arrest without violence. In one prior case, he was accused of throwing a large metal object at a woman's car for no reason, causing several $100s worth of damages. If these twisted cases weren't enough for you, let's take a look at the worst of the worst on this planet in When the Worst Human Beings Go Wrong, coming up right after number 1. Stay tuned. Number 1. Out of control teens abuse fast food workers. In November of 2016, a 29-year-old restaurant employee in Manchester, England, asked some rowdy and disruptive teenagers to leave. Instead of politely complying, a member of the group threw a bottle of soda at the worker's head. One of the badly behaved diners returned a short while later and stabbed the employee in the arm with a pair of scissors. He went to the hospital for treatment of his wound. Greater Manchester Police released surveillance footage of 2 persons of interest, but it's unclear whether the perpetrators were ever caught. 20-year-old Emma Rourke was reported missing on January the 27th of 2022, having last been seen by her family at about 11:30 that morning when she left to take a walk along the American River Parkway. The young woman, a resident of Rancho Cordova, California, described as being on the autism spectrum, remained missing until February the 1st when police found her partially nude body in a secluded area at the American River access point in Sacramento. According to the resulting police report, Rourke had been kidnapped, assaulted and fatally strangled. Her remains were bound with rope and hung from a tree under a series of tarps near the riverbank in what the authorities described as a homeless encampment. DNA recovered from the crime scene was linked to 37-year-old Mikaelo Morgan Rawls, a transient from the Sacramento area with a criminal record dating back to 2005 for burglary, resisting arrest and being a felon in possession of ammunition. 2 days after abducting and brutally murdering Rourke, Rawls reportedly sold her cell phone to another homeless man, later identified as Cedric Sandiford, and told him not to reveal where he'd gotten it. In defiance of Rawls' instructions, Sandiford used the device to contact Rourke's father, who in turn contacted the authorities. Sandiford ultimately led investigators to the encampment where he'd purchased the phone, the same encampment where the victim's body was located. Rawls was held in custody without bond on charges that included murder with special circumstances. During a preliminary court hearing held a few days after his arrest, he showed little emotion and spoke only to correct the Sacramento County Court Commissioner on the correct pronunciation of his name. Number 7. Levi Isaac Davis. The police in Middleton, Idaho were called to the 100 block of East Myrtle Lake Street after receiving an emergency call at about 3:30 p.m. on October the 10th of 2022. Upon their arrival, law enforcement discovered the body of Carly Cantrell lying in a pool of blood on the floor of her residence with chunks of hair and skin missing. Emergency crews were called to the scene, but the victim, who'd suffered apparent knife wounds to the neck and abdomen, was ultimately pronounced dead. The Canyon County Sheriff's Office interviewed Cantrell's neighbors, who reported seeing a blue vehicle leave the scene of the murder earlier that day. The car reportedly matched the description of a vehicle belonging to the victim's son, 26-year-old Levi Isaac Davis, who was tracked down and arrested in Nampa shortly before midnight. Investigators found blood-stained clothes in the backseat of Davis's car and in his bedroom. Officers also observed a deep laceration on his upper thigh, a scratch on his hand, as well as a burn mark on his bicep. It subsequently emerged that the young man had been kicked out of the family home due to his poor behavior, which police theorized had served as a motivating factor behind the truly horrific killing. While speaking about his mother, Davis allegedly showed no emotion or remorse for his actions. Before her death, Cantrell had served as the executive director of the West Valley Humane Society Animal Shelter in Caldwell, which said in a commemorative statement that she was a kind, compassionate, and empathetic friend, mother, wife, grandmother, and daughter. Number 6. Frank Brett Jr. Police and fire officials in Buffalo, New York responded to the scene of a house fire on Manhattan Avenue in the early morning hours of January the 11th of 2018. The charred, lifeless body of 28-year-old Elizabeth Bell was found on the second floor of the residence. 5 other people had reportedly escaped from the blaze, including Bell's 7-year-old daughter, who sustained burns to her feet but was otherwise in stable condition. A short time later, authorities came upon the victim's boyfriend, Frank Brett Jr., hiding in another nearby house. He was suffering from severe burns to his entire body, for which he was taken to the Erie County Medical Center. Brett remained in the hospital's burn treatment center for over a year, while recovering from the extensive injuries he'd sustained in the fire, which investigators subsequently determined had been started by him. On the day of the incident, the man had allegedly tried to kill Bell by burning her alive in her bedroom following an argument in which they'd broken up, by dousing her in an accelerant and setting her body alight. Brett also inadvertently set fire to both himself and the house. The Erie County District Attorney said in an official statement that it was one of the most horrific domestic violence homicide cases that his office had ever prosecuted. In March of 2022, a jury found Brett guilty of second-degree murder, for which he was given a sentence of 25 to life. Number 5. Deandrea Holloway. On June the 9th of 2022, the decapitated corpse of 22-year-old Lies Dodd was found by her mother at her apartment in Alton, Illinois. Her severed head had reportedly been discarded in a nearby dumpster. The victim was pregnant with her first child at the time of her death and had a due date in late July. Upon launching an investigation into the abominable homicide, local police identified Dodd's on-again, off-again boyfriend, Deandrea Holloway, as their prime suspect. The 22-year-old man was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of intentional homicide to an unborn child, dismembering a human body, concealment of a homicide death, as well as motor vehicle-related offenses. He was held in custody on a $2 million bond as the case's legal proceedings got underway. Alton Police Chief Marcos Pulido said that Dodd had been savagely killed and called Holloway's actions beyond reprehensible. When asked to recount the moment she discovered her daughter's beheaded body, the victim's mother stated, "It's not something I wish on anybody, so yeah, I'd rather not speak on that." In September of 2022, Holloway was found unfit to stand trial after undergoing a mental health evaluation. Number 4. Justin Fields. At around 5:30 p.m. on October the 22nd of 2022, deputies with the Blount County Sheriff's Office in Alabama were called to 102 Bailey Drive in Springville after a neighbor requested a welfare check for resident Tammy Bailey. When officers entered the home, they came upon the 52-year-old woman's mutilated corpse It was subsequently determined that she'd been stabbed over 100 times with an 8-inch long survival-type knife. The autopsy suggested that the very first stab, which went straight through Bailey's chest and pierced her heart, had been the fatal blow. After she was already dead, her killer decapitated her and severed one of her lower limbs. The victim's live-in boyfriend, Justin Fields, allegedly confessed to committing the crime himself, and he was taken into custody at the scene. According to the Blount County Sheriff, the 38-year-old man indicated that the grisly crime had been precipitated by an argument centered around Bailey's unwillingness to have intercourse with him. After initially stabbing the woman in frustration, Fields, who admitted to having been drinking to celebrate his birthday, claimed to have blacked out as he continually plunged the knife into her lifeless body, then dismembered it. As of the latest developments, the case was slated to appear before a grand jury in January of 2023. Number 3. Robert Wayne Gore. The lifeless body of University of Miami student Yasser Talal Ibrahim Abul Faraj was found at his Coral Gables apartment by his roommate on October the 7th of 2018. The Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's Office determined that the 23-year-old architecture student had died from more than 60 stab wounds inflicted with multiple sharp force instruments. The homicide investigation ultimately led to the identification of local homeless man Robert Wayne Gore as a suspect. Later in the month of October, 28-year-old Gore was tracked down and taken into custody at a mobile gas station in Cutler Bay, in the area of Southwest 200th Street and South Dixie Highway. After being read his rights, the suspect reportedly provided authorities with a video confession to Abul Faraj's slaying. On the day of the deadly incident, Gore entered the victim's apartment through an unlocked door. After brutally murdering the young man, he allegedly fled on foot with several stolen items. Charged with first-degree murder and armed burglary, Gore was denied bond while being held at the Turner Guilford Knight Correctional Center. As of recent updates, it was unclear how the case's legal proceedings had played out. Number 2. Helen Bustami. Early on the morning of October the 26th of 2022, emergency dispatch in Las Vegas received a startling phone call in which a woman said, "I think I killed my mummy." The caller gave her address, 10190 June Flower Drive. Before hanging up the phone, Metropolitan police officers were sent to the home, where they found a woman suffering from multiple stab wounds. Emergency medical crews attempted to revive the victim, identified as 62-year-old Afaf Hussanan, but she was ultimately pronounced dead at the scene. During the subsequent investigation, the police learned that a mother and daughter had lived at the residence in question, with the daughter being identified as the original 911 caller, Helen Bustami, aged 28. Less than an hour after the latter fled the scene of the mother's murder, a license plate reader caught her driving south on Interstate 15 towards California. Highway patrol troopers tailed Bustami before pulling her over near Barstow. While speaking with police, the young woman again admitted to killing her mother, indicating that they'd got into an argument which escalated into a physical altercation. Bustami revealed that she'd broken a glass table over the victim's head before using a glass shard to stab her multiple times and slit her throat. The young woman was held in custody in Rancho Cucamonga, California, while awaiting extradition back to Las Vegas, where she faced the charge of open murder with a deadly weapon. Number 1. Jose Raphael Solano Landaeta. Shortly before noon on September the 8th of 2022, a young mother was brutally attacked by her ex-boyfriend outside her apartment on Magnolia Avenue and Laurel Street in San Carlos, California. According to the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, 27-year-old Karina Castro was butchered with a sword by Jose Raphael Solano Landaeta, who then beheaded the woman in front of horrified witnesses. The 33-year-old man briefly fled the scene on foot before returning unarmed a short time later, at which point he was arrested by responding police officers. Landaeta was booked into the San Mateo County Jail without bond. The deadly incident reportedly stemmed from a domestic dispute between the former couple, who shared a 1-year-old daughter. When asked about Landaeta's potential fate, the victim's father stated, "I don't feel he should continue breathing. I think the death penalty would be perfect for him. During the man's arraignment in Redwood City, he kept his head down and refrained from speaking. His defense team requested that the case's legal proceedings be suspended until he undergoes a psychiatric evaluation, to which the judge agreed. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be forced to pay $10 every time you used a cuss word, or be forced to pay $10 every time you had an alcoholic beverage? Let us know in the comments section below.